Interview questions on Python software and web development fundamentals. A junior Python developer needs to understand essential knowledge areas beyond just writing Python code, including APIs, web development, databases, networking, security, software design principles, and best practices in modern software development. What is an API and how does it work? Well, an API, or Application Programming Interface, allows two applications to communicate with each other. It defines a set of rules and protocols for building and interacting with software applications. APIs expose certain functionalities of an application to external users or applications. For example, a REST API uses HTTP requests to perform CRUD, which stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete operations on resources. What is JSON and how is it used with APIs? JSON, or JavaScript Object Notation, is a lightweight data interchange format that is easy to read and write for humans and easy to parse for machines. It is widely used in APIs to exchange data between a client and a server. JSON data is structured as key value pairs and is commonly used to transmit structured data over a network connection. What is version control, and why is it important in software development? Version control is a system that tracks changes to files over time, allowing multiple developers to collaborate on a project without overwriting each other's work. It is essential because it helps manage changes to code, maintain a history of modifications, revert to previous versions if needed, and enable branching and merging for collaborative work. Git is a popular version control system. What is continuous integration, or CI, and continuous deployment, or CD? Continuous integration is a practice where developers frequently integrate code changes into a shared repository. Automated builds and tests are run to detect issues early. Continuous deployment takes CI a step further by automatically deploying changes to production after they pass all tests. This reduces the time to release new features and ensures faster feedback and delivery. What is test-driven development, or TDD? Test-driven development is a software development practice where developers write tests before writing the actual code. The process involves writing a failing test case for a specific functionality, then writing the minimum amount of code to pass the test, and finally refactoring the code to improve its quality. TDD helps ensure that code is reliable, reduces bugs, and promotes clean, maintainable code. What is the difference between REST and SOAP APIs? REST, which stands for Representational State Transfer, is a lightweight, stateless architecture typically used for web services. It uses standard HTTP methods like GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE, and commonly formats data in JSON or XML. SOAP, or Simple Object Access Protocol, is a protocol that uses XML messaging and has more rigid standards for security and error handling. REST is often preferred for its simplicity and scalability, while SOAP is used for transactions requiring high security. What is the difference between TCP and UDP protocols? Well, TCP, or Transmission Control Protocol, is a connection-oriented protocol that ensures reliable and ordered delivery of data between applications. It's suitable for applications where data integrity is critical, such as file transfers or web browsing. On the other hand, UDP, or User Datagram Protocol, is a connectionless protocol that provides faster but less reliable communication. It's ideal for applications where speed is more important than reliability, such as live streaming or online gaming. How do you handle merge conflicts in Git? Merge conflicts occur when changes from different branches or contributors affect the same part of a file. To handle merge conflicts in Git, you need to identify the conflicted files using JIT status, open the conflicted files and manually resolve conflicts by choosing which changes to keep. Then, stage the resolved files using git add. Finally, commit the changes using git commit. How do you make an HTTP request in Python? Which libraries can you use? In Python, you can use libraries like requests or http.client to make HTTP requests. The request library is more user-friendly and is commonly used for making get, post, put, and delete requests. Here's an example of making a get request using requests. Import requests, response equals requests, get web address, print response, JSON. What is caching and how can it improve application performance? Well, caching is the process of storing frequently accessed data in a temporary storage area known as a cache to reduce the time it takes to retrieve it. Caching improves application performance by reducing the load on the underlying data source, such as a database or API, minimizing latency and speeding up response times. Common caching strategies include in-memory caching, using tools like Redis or Memcached, and HTTP caching, using headers like etag and cache control. So, what is SSL TLS, and why is it important for web security? SSL, or Secure Sockets Layer, and TLS, or Transport Layer Security, are cryptographic protocols that provide secure communication over a computer network. They encrypt data transmitted between a client and a server, protecting it from eavesdropping, tampering, and forgery. SSL TLS is essential for web security because it ensures that sensitive data, like login credentials and financial information, is securely transmitted over the internet. Alright, so what is an ORM and why would you use it? ORM, or Object Relational Mapping, is a programming technique that allows developers to interact with a database using an object-oriented approach. It abstracts the database interactions, allowing developers to manipulate database records as if they were objects in their programming language. ORMs like scalable in Python or Django ORM make it easier to write and maintain code, reduce the need for manual SQL, and provide built-in features like connection pooling and transaction management. So, how do you create and manage containers using Docker? Well, to create and manage containers using Docker, you use the following commands. First, you run docker build t-image-name to create a Docker image from a Docker file. Then, you use docker run dname, container name, image name to run a container from an image. To list all running containers, you type docker ps. If you need to stop a running container, you use docker stop container name. And finally, to remove a stopped container, you use docker rm container name. Alright, what is microservices architecture, and how does it differ from monolithic architecture? Microservices architecture is a software design pattern where a large application is divided into small independent services that communicate with each other via APIs. Each microservice is responsible for a specific functionality and can be developed, deployed, and scaled independently. In contrast, monolithic architecture is a single, unified codebase where all components are tightly coupled. Microservices offer greater flexibility, scalability, and fault isolation, but can introduce complexity in managing inter-service communication and data consistency. So, what is a relational database, and how does it differ from a NoSQL database? A relational database organizes data into tables with rows and columns, using SQL, or structured query language, for querying. It is suitable for structured data and enforces relationships between tables through primary and foreign keys. A NoSQL database, on the other hand, is designed for unstructured or semi-structured data and does not use SQL for querying. NoSQL databases are more flexible, can scale horizontally, and are better suited for large-scale data and real-time web applications. How do you secure an API or a web application against common vulnerabilities like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and cross-site request forgery? Well, to secure an API or web application, you should use parameterized queries or prepared statements to prevent SQL injection. Also, sanitize and validate user inputs to avoid cross-site scripting. Implement anti-CSRF tokens for form submissions to protect against cross-site request forgery attacks. It's crucial to regularly update and patch software and libraries. And of course, use HTTPS to secure data transmission. What is cloud computing, and how does it benefit software development? Cloud computing is the delivery of computing services, such as servers, storage, databases, networking, software, and analytics, over the internet, often referred to as the cloud. It benefits software development by providing scalable resources on demand, reducing the need for physical hardware, and offering flexible pricing models. Developers can deploy applications quickly, scale them easily, and manage resources more efficiently. What is Docker, and why is it used in development and deployment? Docker is a platform that allows you to automate the deployment of applications inside lightweight, portable containers. These containers package the application code, dependencies, and configuration, ensuring that it runs consistently across different environments. Docker is used in development and deployment to create isolated environments, simplify dependency management, and enable consistent, repeatable deployments. What is the software development lifecycle, or SDLC? The software development lifecycle, or SDLC, is a process followed for software development, typically consisting of phases like planning, analysis, design, development, testing, deployment, and maintenance. It provides a structured approach to ensure software quality, predictability, and cost management throughout the project's life. What are transactions in a database, and why are they important? Transactions in a database are sequences of one or more SQL statements that are executed as a single unit. A transaction ensures that all statements are completed successfully, known as a commit, or none at all, referred to as a rollback, maintaining the integrity and consistency of the database. Transactions are crucial for ensuring data accuracy, particularly in scenarios involving multiple operations, such as financial transactions. What is OAuth, and how does it relate to APIs? OAuth, or Open Authorization, is a secure authorization protocol that allows third-party applications to access a user's resources without exposing their credentials. It is commonly used with APIs to provide secure delegated access, enabling applications to authenticate and authorize users without requiring direct access to their credentials. What are the common HTTP methods? Get, post, put, delete, and when would you use each? The common HTTP methods are get, which is used to retrieve data from a server and is read only. Post is for sending data to a server to create a resource. Put is used to update or replace an existing resource on the server. Delete, as you might guess, is for removing a resource from the server. You use these methods depending on the operation you need to perform with the API. What is the purpose of a firewall, and how does it work in a network? A firewall is a security device that monitors and controls incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predefined security rules. It acts as a barrier between a trusted internal network and untrusted external networks, like the internet. Firewalls prevent unauthorized access, filter malicious traffic, and protect sensitive data. How would you handle errors when working with external APIs in your code? To handle errors when working with external APIs, you can use try and except blocks to catch exceptions raised by API requests. Check the HTTP status codes returned by the API, for example, 200 for success, 404 for not found, and 500 for server errors. Implement retry logic for transient errors like network timeouts. Log error details for troubleshooting, and provide user-friendly error messages or fallback options. What is DNS, and how does it work? DNS, or Domain Name System, is a hierarchical system that translates human-readable domain names like www.example.com into IP addresses that computers use to identify each other on a network. When a user types a domain name into a browser, DNS servers are queried to find the corresponding IP address, enabling the browser to locate the server hosting the website. What is load balancing, and why is it important? Load balancing is the process of distributing incoming network traffic across multiple servers to ensure no single server becomes overwhelmed. It improves application availability, reliability, and performance by evenly distributing the load and providing redundancy in case of server failure. Explain the CAP theorem in distributed systems. The CAP theorem states that a distributed data store can only provide 2 out of 3 guarantees. Consistency, meaning all nodes see the same data at the same time. Availability, meaning every request receives a response. And partition tolerance, meaning the system continues to function despite network partitions. According to the theorem, it is impossible to achieve all 3 simultaneously, so systems must make trade-offs based on their requirements. What is the role of HTTPS, and how does it differ from HTTP? Well, HTTPS, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, is basically an extension of HTTP that encrypts data between a client, like a web browser, and a server using SSL or TLS. Unlike HTTP, which transmits data in plain text, HTTPS ensures data confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity. This means it protects against eavesdropping, man-in-the-middle attacks, and data tampering. What are indexes in a database, and why are they important? Indexes are data structures that improve the speed of data retrieval operations on a database table. They work kind of like a lookup table, allowing the database to find records more quickly. However, it's worth noting that indexes also require additional storage space and can slow down write operations, like insert and update, since they need to be maintained. How do you connect a Python application to a database? To connect a Python application to a database, you typically use a database adapter or driver specific to the database you are working with. For example, you might use PsychoPG2 for PostgreSQL or MySQL connector for MySQL. You import the library, establish a connection using the appropriate connection string, create a cursor object, and then execute SQL queries. What is code review, and why is it important? Well, code review is a process where developers examine each other's code to identify bugs, improve code quality, ensure adherence to coding standards, and share knowledge. It's important because it helps catch errors early, improves the overall quality of the code base, fosters team collaboration, and promotes best practices. How do you write and run tests in Python, for example, using Unitist or PyTest? To write tests in Python, you can use the built-in Unitist framework or third-party tools like PyTest. You define test cases as classes that inherit from Unitist test case and write individual test methods prefixed with test underscore. To run tests, you use the command line to invoke the test runner, like Python, munitist, or PyTest. What is the purpose of branching in Git, and how do you create a new branch? Branching in Git allows developers to create separate lines of development, enabling them to work on features or fixes without affecting the main codebase. You create a new branch using git branch underscore name and switch to it using git checkout branch underscore name. You can also combine these steps with git checkout b branch underscore name. What are the differences between Agile and Waterfall methodologies? Agile and Waterfall are 2 different software development methodologies. Waterfall is a linear and sequential approach where each phase must be completed before moving on to the next, such as requirements, design, development, testing, and deployment. It is less flexible, and changes are costly after the initial phase. Agile, on the other hand, is an iterative and incremental approach that focuses on flexibility, customer collaboration, and responsiveness to change. Agile delivers work in small, consumable increments and encourages continuous feedback, making it more adaptable to changes. What is the difference between git pull and git fetch? Git fetch downloads changes from a remote repository, but does not integrate them into the local repository. It simply updates the remote tracking branches. Git pull is essentially a combination of git fetch and git merge, meaning it fetches changes from the remote repository and then immediately merges them into the current local branch. Use git fetch when you want to see the changes before merging, and git pull when you are ready to integrate them directly. What is object caching, and how does it differ from data caching? Object caching refers to storing the results of expensive computations or queries, like database query results or complex calculations, in a temporary store to speed up subsequent access to the same data. Data caching, on the other hand, involves storing raw data in a cache to avoid fetching it from the original source repeatedly. Object caching is typically at a higher abstraction level and may include objects with behavior, while data caching is primarily concerned with raw data storage and retrieval. How do you implement logging in a Python application? Well, Python provides a built-in logging module to implement logging in applications. You can configure logging to display messages of different severity levels, like debug, info, warning, error, and critical, and output them to various destinations such as the console, files, or even external logging services. For instance, here's a simple logging example. Python import logging basic config, level equals logging info, format =, ask time level name message logging info, this is an info message. Logging.error, this is an error message. What is cross-origin resource sharing, commonly known as CORS, and why is it important? Cross-origin resource sharing, or CORS, is a security feature implemented by web browsers that controls how resources from one domain can be requested by another domain. It's crucial because it prevents malicious websites from making unauthorized requests to servers on behalf of a user. To allow cross-origin requests, the server must explicitly specify which domains are permitted to access its resources by setting appropriate HTTP headers, such as access control allow origin. What is dependency injection, and how does it help in software development? Dependency injection is a design pattern where an object or function receives other objects or services it depends on, rather than creating them itself. This approach promotes loose coupling between components, making the code more modular, testable, and easier to maintain. Dependency injection can be achieved using constructor injection, setter injection, or interface injection. What are microservices and what are the challenges associated with them? Well, microservices are a software architecture style that structures an application as a collection of small, independent services, each responsible for a specific business function. These services communicate with each other through APIs. Now, the challenges associated with microservices include managing inter-service communication, ensuring data consistency, handling distributed transactions, dealing with increased operational complexity, and implementing robust monitoring and logging. How do you handle user authentication and authorization in a web application? User authentication is the process of verifying a user's identity, typically by using credentials like a username and password. Authorization, on the other hand, determines what resources the authenticated user is allowed to access. Common ways to handle authentication and authorization in a web application include implementing session-based or token-based authentication, like JWT, and using third-party authentication providers such as OAuth or OpenID Connect. Additionally, securing API endpoints and routes with middleware that checks the user's roles and permissions is crucial. What is event-driven architecture, and where would you use it? Event-driven architecture is a design pattern where components of a system communicate and respond to events, that is, changes in state, rather than through direct calls or tightly coupled interactions. Each component or service can produce, detect, and consume events asynchronously. This pattern is particularly useful in applications that need to handle high loads, require decoupling of services, or need to react in real time to a large number of events. Examples include IoT, gaming, or financial systems. What is a CDN, or Content Delivery Network, and how does it improve web performance? Well, a CDN is a network of geographically distributed servers that cache and deliver static content, like images, videos, style sheets, and JavaScript files, closer to the user's location. CDNs improve web performance by reducing latency, decreasing the load on the origin server, and providing faster content delivery, especially for users who are far from the primary server. How do you ensure that a web application is scalable? To ensure a web application is scalable, you can use load balancing to distribute traffic evenly across servers. Implement caching strategies to reduce the load on databases and servers. Optimize database queries and use indexing appropriately. Utilize a microservices architecture to allow independent scaling of different components. Employ cloud-based solutions to dynamically scale resources up or down based on demand. What are ACID properties in databases, and why are they important? ACID stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability, which are the 4 key properties of transactions in a database. These properties ensure reliable processing of database transactions. Atomicity ensures that all operations in a transaction are completed. If not, the transaction is aborted. Consistency ensures that a transaction takes the database from one valid state to another. Isolation ensures that transactions do not interfere with each other. Durability ensures that once a transaction is committed, it remains so, even in the case of a system failure. What is a message queue, and why would you use one? A message queue is a communication method used in software systems where messages are stored in a queue until they are processed by a receiver. It enables asynchronous communication between different components or services, ensuring that messages are not lost, even if the receiving service is temporarily unavailable. Message queues help in decoupling services, load leveling, and improving resilience and scalability. How do you implement rate limiting in an API? Rate limiting controls the number of requests a user can make to an API in a specific time period, protecting the API from being overwhelmed by too many requests. Rate limiting can be implemented using techniques like using a fixed or sliding window counter to track the number of requests, using a token bucket or leaky bucket algorithm, employing middleware or external tools like API gateways to enforce rate limits and return appropriate HTTP status codes, for example, 429 too many requests. These questions and answers continue to provide a well-rounded overview of knowledge areas that go beyond basic Python skills, focusing on broader software development concepts, systems design, and practical know-how essential for a junior Python